Got sent another model by a viewer, and this time around it's an IHC 210-2, which you can see obviously needs a little work in the linkage area so that this all works again. But in addition to that, he's not quite happy with the generic detail of these and is hoping to have it redetailed a little bit as well as repainted to more closely match ATSF prototypes. So let's get to it. So after looking around a little, I think the first thing I want to do is remove the shell. So just looking at how this is built, I see a couple screws here, but thinking about my IHC 282, those might be for the motor. So I'll start with the one in front here. That should go up into the boiler. I also see this screw on top here, which I'm guessing is normally supposed to be covered by a detail. He did send me a whole bag of extra parts that came off the model, so maybe it's in there. We'll see. This uses the same shell as the 482 and the 464 from IHC, so I'm guessing the disassembly for those would be very similar to this one. Ha! Now it's coming off. Still something left holding it in there though. That pipe there. And what else? Smoke box front. Yeah, it looks like this just pulls off. And what do we got inside here? Yeah, there's that wiring. It seems like that's what's holding things in place. Just have to get that out of there. It looks like there's a spot for a smoke unit here, so I wonder if that is wiring for a smoke unit that was just removed at some point. I do not know. Huh. So this whole feed water heater detail comes off. I thought that was a molded part. This is one thing he actually wanted me to replace with an Elesco heater down here. So that's convenient at least. But no additional screws or anything under there. So I'm not sure what is holding this weight in place, aside from maybe some pressure or something. Unless I can take off the boiler. There's a screw right here. Well, so far this is about as interesting as taking the boiler off of a Genesis 282. So I think I'll look around a bit more on this and see what's going on. Okay, so I pulled the railings out from the back of the cab and then undid a couple latches holding that on. So now I can get to this screw and maybe that'll allow me some access to where I need to go. Okay, this is starting to lift off. Latches. These are starting to come apart. Okay, well there's the floor of the boiler. That still leaves the weight inside. Here we go. Yeah. There, that was the key to everything. Getting that weight out of there. That was holding all the wires in place. All right, now I can start getting to work on here. So there's the motor. That's just the kind of the same 3-pole skewed armature that they used in most of their medium to large size steam engines. It's a smooth, quiet runner with some pretty good torque and better low speed than you would expect from a 3-pole. So I'll just get that into a spot where I can take this little screw off. All right, so with this off, I'll be able to figure out what size I need for replacement. I also need to make a new spacer piece for that main rod going to the crosshead. So with this, I'll be able to copy that part and get that working again. Okay, I've got this working pretty well now. So what I did was I cut out some pieces of brass tubing, just really short lengths of it, one of them to fit into the side rod there, and then the other one acts as a sort of thick washer. And the reason I didn't use a washer was because the diameter would have made it a lot more visible. So this keeps it more hidden behind. And then I couldn't find a hex screw to fit that spot, so I ended up using a flat head. I'll paint that to look a bit better, but as for the running quality, it seems to be working just fine. Now let's get on to the detailing. I think I mentioned before, but part of the detailing I'm doing for this is doing some repainting and relettering. So I've got the tinder out here. I'm just gonna take it apart. And before I start doing the actual modifications for new detail parts, I'm gonna do some paint stripping so that I can work with the, well, basically just work with a better surface on these parts and do the details and repainting all at once. That should give me the cleanest results. I think there's one more screw in here. Yeah. So you have to swivel that rear truck around in order to get the shell off. But now, yeah, that is lifting off of there. That has an LED backup light, which looks like it's just held in by a piece of tape. Yeah. So that makes it easy to pull out. So there's the inside of the tinder. You've got your DCC plug, which this is one of the only IHC models to ever get that. The rest of them were just the typical DC hard wiring, and you had to clip things, unsolder things, and rewire for DCC as needed, but this one made it a lot simpler. It's also got a good amount of weight in there, so the tinder will have a good amount of traction and pick up electricity better. All right, so to strip the paint, I'm going to put the tinder shell and the cab in there. Those are the only two parts with any lettering, so any others I think I can just do a little smoothing and painting over, and those should look fine and match to the rest of it. And to do the paint stripping, I've got this 99.9% alcohol, which for whatever reason was less expensive than 91%. So just pour that on in there. Just have that filled enough to cover both parts. I'll give those some time to soak and to make sure that the alcohol doesn't evaporate while I'm away. Just lock that lid on top. We'll see how this turns out. Well, after letting that soak overnight, the lettering and paint brushed off pretty well. I'll just give this a final cleaning in the sink before I start to work with it. I haven't scrubbed the cab yet. You can see that everything is still on there, but it's so softened up that just a couple brushes and off it goes. All right, so I'm getting a few 3D printed details on here, like these number boards, and then the feed water heater right here, which is not yet glued in place. And then I've also got things modified to fit the brass boiler, front, smoke box cover, and I think that's going to look really good when it's done. So I just have to drill out the center of that for an LED light, but I'll get to that later, of course. So just a few other details left to add on, and then I can get to painting this. Well, I also have to fill in a few holes, but after that I can get to painting this. Things are almost ready for painting here. I've got all the details in place that need to be on the main body. And I've also done some work on that brass smoke box front. I installed an LED light, and you can see that that is working nice and bright. It has kind of a warm white color to look more incandescent. So that I will glue into the headlight, and I'll paint the back of it black so that no light bleeds through, so only the front will be shining once this is done. And I also installed a new front railing here to line up with the stanchions on the boiler and to look more like the ATSF handrail designs. Okay, I think that does it for the new detail parts. So you can see I've got the 3D printed Elasco feed water heater down there. I also added in the front boiler braces because there actually were holes for those already. They just never added those. I put on the ATSF style front railing, which will attach to those stanchions along with the other main handrails. We've got the bell on there with a piece of metal to hold it, number boards, the dome for the whistles, or pop valves, and the new whistle here. And the rest of the details are installed, and I've filled and sanded in all the holes. So now I'll just get this thing cleaned up a bit and work on the painting. Okay, things are just about done here. I've got the paint and decals on. I just need to give it some clear coat, a few little touch-ups in a couple places for just some extra detail painting, and then I can get this back together and finished. Things are almost back together, and I've wired in these LEDs. They're really bright in my testing, so we'll see how that looks on the front of the boiler. But anyway, I decided to just go ahead and reuse the insulation they already provided there, so I'll just get the boiler front on there and stuff those wires back in, and with that I think this will be done. We'll see how it does. Well, there it is on the track, all finished, and I think that turned out looking pretty good, even if I didn't get everything quite perfect. I'm not quite as good at painting as some of the real professionals out there, but I think I did an alright job here. The dome with the whistles on it turned out looking pretty good. And the other details turned out alright too, I think. Got the bell and the number boards there. And then going back to the cab, I added glass to all the windows and I painted the inside so the walls are kind of a realistic green. And can't really show it too well here. You can see maybe just a spot here and there, but I painted the gauges on the back head too. So this all turned out looking pretty good. And as for the running quality, it's on a switch. Try that again. There we go. Now it's moving. Smooth, it's quiet. And that headlight does work. These LEDs are very bright. But they look a lot more realistic than the amber or sometimes even blue that are often used by the manufacturers. So both the headlight and reverse lights work. And the valve gear is holding together fine with the fix that I did. I already gave it some test runs around the track before just to make sure things would hold up. And I think that this is going to be a good, long-lasting, and reliable runner. Some of the details are a little fragile. There wasn't much I could do about that. But I gave this my best shot as one of my first super detailing and repainting projects in a long time. So I hope the owner of this model likes the work that's done and that it works for him for a long time.